This is the Wait Just an Infosec podcast, your weekly opportunity to tap into the minds of some of the world's foremost cybersecurity experts. Wait Just an Infosec is a weekly show live streamed on SANS Institute social media channels on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. The show features a wide range of guests from across the Infosec community. Whether we're diving into the weeds of the latest data breach or exploring the security implications of groundbreaking technology such as generative AI, each episode brings you new insight to keep you engaged in the industry, feed your fire for knowledge, and amplify your value as an Infosec practitioner. Join the SANS community and gain free access to cutting-edge industry news, cybersecurity resources like technical research, and tools that can't be found elsewhere. Subscribe for free today at sans.org/join.
So pivoting right now, we're going to be shifting over to my conversation with Jake Williams that we actually recorded last week, right prior to Thanksgiving, based off of the schedules. So Jake Williams is a personal friend of mine. I've known Jake since he was in the military. We both have a Title 10, Title 50 background. Basically, well, what that means is both of us have worked in worlds that basically spun around offensive operations at some point or another. And we wanted to have a conversation specifically considering the amount of newsworthy topics that are currently cropping up in the news between the various conflicts that are going on around the world right now. And you see a lot of news headlines talking about website defacements. What are some of the adversaries and countries in conflict that are going against each other, potentially trying to do? So I brought Jake in to kind of sit down with us and, have almost like a fireside chat about like, what is this thing called offensive operations? How does it integrate into the daily life? Is there these, oh my God, level of aesthetics surrounding it that sometimes the press puts in, almost akin to like shark attacks, that makes you feel like is a power about to go out? Is these some of the things that you should be potentially concerned about? So when I initially talking to Jake about the show, I said I'd really like to make this a very neutral. We're not going to dive into any of the specific conflicts that are going on. We specifically are trying to discuss what is offensive operations in general, and what countries that are currently engaging in it in both peacetime and wartime, how they might be thinking about it, how they might be engaging in it, all from a very high-level generic discussion, trying to educate just the general public and news entities about the key questions that they should be asking all along. So it's with my greatest pride and ability that I'll introduce the segment and my personal friend, Jake Williams, as we flip over to our segment that has been pre-recorded. Please ask questions during the comments. We're still live. I'm going to be going into LinkedIn and answering questions that people have during this segment. So on LinkedIn, definitely switch over to it, and I will be answering questions and comments as this segment rolls forward. So without any further ado. Really happy to be the co-host again today on Wait Just an Infosec. It is really exciting today because we have Jake Williams, SANS instructor and former cyber operator across the years. And one of the things that has been coming up quite frequently in the news is cyber operations as it relates to the conflict that's going on in Ukraine and versus Russia, and also a lot of discussions around cyber operations that is going down in the current Israel versus Hamas conflict. As tragic as both of these conflicts are, I think one of the things I'd like to really baseline is, what is cyber operations, how it works, and introduce Jake as our guest today. So Jake, welcome to the show, first of all, and really glad you're here. Can you give us just a little bit about your background beyond what I presented as to why are you able to talk cyber operations and as an authority on this? Because I have a background in it too, but again, this intersection of really trying to explain to the general public what cyber operations is.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, to your point, right, I did cyber operations for a number of years for the National Security Agency. That's widely public at this point now, thanks to the shadow brokers. Thanks, guys. But ultimately, I have some experience there, obviously, and then also, of course, over the years, looking at investigating incidents caused by other nation state cyber actors as well. And so left the obviously the operations world, left that in 2013, and since then have spent a lot of time doing both CTI for attribution, as well as, of course, just incident response investigations involving a number of different nation state operators.
And again, thank you for your service. We just passed Veterans Day.
Well, ditto, of course.
Well, yeah. So a lot of people talk red teaming, versus cyber operations. What is cyber operation, offensive operations, and how is it really different from red teaming? From the scope of when you talk to the general public about information security jobs and roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, red teaming is such an interesting dynamic there for red teaming versus cyber operations. But when you think about red teaming, it's really more trying to find attack surface, right? So what could a threat actor do? Obviously, there's the desire not in most red team operations not to get caught, but that don't get caught mantra goes to the nth when we start talking about cyber operations, because red teaming is there to understand obviously attack surface. Cyber operations is there to fulfill an intelligence requirement, right? So anything that doesn't get you towards that intelligence requirement isn't interesting from a cyber operations perspective. Whereas in red teaming, any piece of attack surface, right, that can be leveraged is obviously interesting. So these are interrelated concepts, but they definitely differ, both in scope and in operations.
And so to dive into that a little bit further, you talk about the intelligence requirement. So it doesn't sound like website defacements would be a part of someone's cyber operations campaign. Is that correct? Or how would you explain that?
Well, it could be, right? So if you wanted to deny, for instance, the use of that website for whatever reason, for a particular purpose, whatever that is, then website defacement ultimately could be part of a cyber operation. Separately, website defacement in the context of a cyber operation, could also be there as a demonstration of capability. It could be there to erode, or could be used to erode confidence in the cyber defenses of the targeted organization. So there are numerous ways that could play out as ultimately as a requirement. But I should note here that when we talk about offensive cyber operations, you really have to separate those between those that are targeting intelligence collection versus those that are delivering an effect. And of course, the website defacement would be an example of the latter, that would be delivering an effect.
Well, that really dives into some of the things that I'd like to talk about. So you have this intelligence requirement, and you also have the potential desired effect. Let's go just focus on peacetime at the onset right now. You have all these nation states with cyber capabilities. And in general, what would be a desired intelligence requirement? What would be the purpose of cyber operations during peacetime?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about cyber operations, this is right out of, by the way, too, right? Very published cyber doctrine, that we're discussing here. Please don't think anybody's discussing anything classified. Realistically, I'm say this for our viewers, right? But realistically here in the context of peacetime, typically you're doing really one of two things. You're either pre-positioning, because you ultimately need to be in the right place to deliver an effect. If a stakeholder, commander, whoever says go deliver an effect, we need to be there. It's not, if you analogize this to like bombing, for instance. We did some of the same stuff in World War II, right? We took islands in the Pacific, so that we were pre-positioned to go deliver an effect. We have to do the same thing with cyber operations in peacetime. And then separately, of course, there's the collection of intelligence. And so that obviously, I'm sure it's very clear. We have a lot of our very sensitive data on our machines, and ultimately then that data can be collected, and ultimately provided to stakeholders as part of an intelligence package. So one of the things that a lot of folks don't think about is that once you have access, and you're pre-positioning, potentially to go deliver an effect down the road, maybe you have some data there as well that's useful for intelligence collection. You can either collect in a network or you can deliver an effect in a network, but never both, right? So there's always that question that stakeholders have to drive home to be like, is the value of the data I'm getting more than the short-term effect or short-term impact of an effect that I might want to deliver?
Okay, so that's really interesting. You've also talked about targeting organizations. What kinds of organizations are targeted? Is it only limited to government and military, or is it expansive beyond that?
Yikes. This is where I'm going to be like super, let me back away here.
Yeah.
And just note, no, I guess probably what's that?
It's a question that comes up quite frequently.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I've investigated, looking at the other side of this, I've investigated nation state targeting at, manufacturers, one at a hospital, right? So, very clearly attributed to a nation state threat actor where they had targeted a hospital chain. And this was for intelligence collection. Ultimately, we attributed that to, or I say attributed, we believe, assess with high confidence that they targeted that for, information about the health status of several diplomats that were being treated there. And so that they were very interested in their, maybe how long would they be there before needing a replacement, let's say, or what have you. I guess I would say from a what kind of organizations get targeted, I don't think there's any organization out there that might not be targeted. Yeah. I remember a Chinese restaurant that I did a incident response for at the behest of another government agency, and it was right around the corner from from a federal courthouse. It was regularly used to go and do jury lunches, I guess, right? They would order from there for jury lunches, and their website got targeted, right? These are you step back and say, well, like, what kind of organization wouldn't be targeted? And if the intelligence requirement is such that that organization can help drive that requirement, right? And it could be something as simple as, again, what did the jury order for lunch? Although I suspect it was probably more towards the getting into the court system there. But, regardless, if you can be used as a stepping stone to fulfill that requirement, you could be targeted.
Right. And that's something, again, from my experience as well, doing a lot of incident response, is that why are nation states attacking manufacturing? Why are they after formulas and schematics? And, the intelligence goes beyond just what we generally attribute, at least in my opinion, to nation state goals. In some cases, it's an economic nation state goal in addition to just the intelligence one. And that's where, trying to, was leading you down that path is like during our work in doing incident response over the years, we've seen nation states go after data directly related that is economic viable or potential trade related that would give them an edge in trade related talks that are going on at a multinational level. That way they would know, if there's mergers and acquisitions between say, for example, a Chinese company and a U.S. Firm, that they would be able to know exactly what the position statements are for that U.S.-based firm. And it is always fascinating that this occurred. So this leads to my next, kind of dovetails into my next question. What attribution, again, especially as we're talking about in peacetime, how are we doing attribution to be able to say that this is a nation state attacker more likely than a organized crime target?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think motivation, is a pretty clear one there, right? As we talk about threats, we break that out in that whole IOC piece: intent, opportunity, capability. Intent obviously is always an assessment, but you can look at the kinds of data being targeted. If you have the right telemetry, inside of an organization, if it's a manufacturing organization and they're looking for the trade secrets, then you're either dealing with the nation state, or you're dealing with cyber espionage. And obviously, Reuters just had a great piece out about, some cyber espionage there, commercial cyber espionage. So, that's not unheard of, but Occam's razor says it's much more common that then is nation state, targeting. If it's not going after something that's immediately saleable, on some dark web forum. So think about PII, PHI, credit card records, those kinds of, information. If it's trade secret, related, by and large, it probably is. Occam's razor says it probably is going to be some level of nation state targeting or involvement.
So a lot of the organizations that we've worked in the past, organizations are still out there, do a lot of attribution to different nation state groups. How how do they do differentiation between a nation state group from, say, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea? How are they accomplishing that? I know it's a kind of a basic question, but there's a lot of our viewers out there. They hear about these, funky panda, and they also APT-12, the different naming schemes, which everyone always disagrees about. How are they actually saying this is one group versus another group?
Yeah, this is having a lot of data and then ultimately doing clustering of activity. So identifying individual groups, that's the easy part, right? And you probably have seen Microsoft and even Mandiant and others doing a bit of this, where sometimes they have a group that they've identified that they're not ready to attribute the group. So like Mandiant oftentimes use like the UNC, right, the UNC, or the the unknown, right, threat actor, and so meaning they haven't attributed it. To attribute the threat actor to a specific, nation or cybercrime group, but they are willing to say that these intrusions are all related to one another. We just don't know who's behind them yet. Ultimately, diving down to the, who is it? Is it Iran? Is it China? Is it Vietnam? Is it whoever? Right? That ultimately typically relies on a number of different elements, one of which is just bad operational security. Doesn't matter how good you are, eventually you'll slip up someplace. And so whether it's, registration details someplace, or, overlaps of, reusing email addresses, reusing infrastructure from previous campaigns that have been publicly attributed, even sometimes reverse engineering, very often reverse engineering malware offers us a lot of hints here as well. Right. And so, identifying and being able to say, hey, this is almost certainly, Russian in origin, for instance. And that stuff often comes from reverse engineering.
Yeah. And that's, some of the reverse engineering, even just the fact that, their habits and the way they're using the command show a typical training regimen that the operators have gone through that says this is the procedures that you take. It's, so reverse engineering is one. I've seen the telltale signs that, it's typically, this is, like what I call like door busting, is like you'll see a team or squad, clear a room the same exact way every single time, because that's the way they're trained to potentially go through there and do it. Not that I'm an expert in clearing rooms. It's just I'm trying to draw an analogy as to what cyber operations might actually end up looking like. So follow-on question, a lot of, tying into the malware, a lot of the corporations and organizations that I've worked with in the past, when you have an unexplainable instance in your network, there's always this apt, and you also see this in the press, that it must be a zero-day exploit that's been used. So first question is, what is a zero-day exploit, and how valuable are they? And do you typically see them in use as frequently as the press alludes to?
First off, the vast majority of organizations don't need to be targeted by a 0 day, right? That's probably the easiest thing to check the box on first and foremost.
How would you define 0 day in the first place?
Well, we define a 0 day as a vulnerability for which a threat actor knows about, right, and has a weaponized exploit for, typically, right? If we're talking about 0 day exploits, I'm not as concerned about 0 day vulnerabilities that have no corresponding exploit. But the threat actor has a weaponized exploit for it, but we don't have a patch, and in most cases don't even know that vulnerability exists.
Yeah.
So it's not something we're looking for. It's not something we're protecting against. It's not, hey, the vulnerability has been disclosed, somebody's weaponized an exploit, but there's no patch. Take the following steps. It's not one of those. Typically, it's we don't even know about it, yet the threat actor's already weaponized it.
How valuable are they, you think?
Ridiculously valuable. I mean, just ridiculously valuable. You're not fishing anymore. You're fishing with dynamite. And so, as a threat actor. And so it gives you some really interesting capabilities, because you as a threat actor with an O-Day are able to target infrastructure that organizations consider to be fully patched, because it is, and yet still, ultimately execute, in the context of remote code execution, right? Execute a payload, on their systems. And so it's extremely valuable, because, you're jumping directly into a spot that they by definition are not looking.
That's it, and again, it gets really interesting, because that kind of like dovetails into, we're talking about just typical cyber operations. And then we start having these conflicts arise, and you see the press and, general public start talking about cyber operations and what it entails. Are we at risk? Is there a significant difference between peacetime and potential during conflict cyber operations that could be occurring?
I mean, certainly there's a difference there, right? If you have an O day, if you're a threat actor who has an O day, 0 day, the more places you use that 0 day, or I should say, the more places. Every time you use it, you risk disclosing that and it being discovered and disclosing it to the public, and then ultimately losing that capability. And so there's obviously a risk calculus, right, that goes into every time you use that O day. Some responsible adult someplace needs to make a decision based on the value of this weapon that you have effectively. Do we expect to get enough value out of using it here, ultimately to justify the use or justify the risk? That risk calculus obviously shifts during wartime, because during peacetime you're hoping to stock these things to enable intelligence collection and hopefully solve a stockpile for delivering effects when you need them. But that risk calculus obviously changes, but how is something that you and I don't have visibility into, that foreign threat actor's risk calculus and how it may have changed, or even what their stockpile of O-days looks like. All right, so it's an interesting academic exercise, but I don't know that our risk posture changes dramatically as we roll into transition from peacetime to wartime in that aspect.
And we've seen that in the past as well, where an aggressive capability or use of a capability has resulted in the release of said capability. Even in some of the major incidents that have taken down shipping organizations and so forth, is that there's that oops moment that sometimes occurs when it gets out in the public, and then you start drawing it back in. It's like, okay, this thing's been in use for a while. It goes back to the indicators of compromise and the IOCs and what we were chatting about before. You talk to the press a lot. I talk to the press a lot. And it's always interesting, the types of questions that come up. Is there anything you would advise them when they're doing their research and background about potential cyber operations that you would say, hey, listen, to do your homework properly, this is what you should start asking if it's cyber operations or not? What would you advise, press, if you're just trying to say, hey, you're new, here's what I would say in order to get the best scoop?
Yeah, I mean, first off, intelligence collection almost always trumps a short-term effect, right? And so, while a lot of times we focus on what the realm of the possible of what could potentially be done, the reality is that if you're sitting in as putting yourself in the stakeholder's shoes of, do I continue to get this information at least, until we're detected, right? Versus, do I just you get rid of all that? I stop getting all this information, to maybe either to face a website or turn off power for 30 minutes or what have you. Man, that's a hard calculus to hard to get to the delivering effect side. But I guess the other one is, speaking on the power side, it's that industrial control systems are ridiculously more robust from a design perspective than most people realize. Getting in and being able to trip a relay, or change the voltage on one of the, ultimately one of the outputs on a PLC, that's easy. Yeah. Being able to do that in a way that causes a specific predetermined outcome, very, very difficult. And that's why you see some of these intrusions, like the Ukraine lights out, incidents where, they took months in the network, to ultimately survey and understand that before they were able to go deliver an effect. That just doesn't scale well.
Yeah. Well, Jake, and again, we're running out of time. One of the things that I really appreciate about you is your ability to speak in very easy terms with candor and something that everyone understands. Is there any final last thoughts about cyber operations that you want, any takeaways that people want them to think about when they're reading things in the press or in relation to any of the ongoing conflicts? Just the average information security professional or the average reader in USA Today, when you hear about this, what are some of the takeaways that you would want them to know or think about?
I think probably the number one, I guess is probably that, we spend a lot of time hypothesizing about O-days and how they might be used to go deliver effects. And look, realistically, in the vast majority of cases, we just don't see that being done, right? We don't see O-days being necessary. It's phishing again and again and again. It's exposed unpatched infrastructure again and again that's used as initial entry points. I think probably the second one is we consistently, we heard it in after the Russian invasion, it's like, oh my gosh, if you support sanctions, Russia's cyber operators are going to come target you, right? And that hasn't played out, right? It's not a question of capability, right? Obviously, that certainly they have the capabilities to do that. It's a resourcing issue, right? And so I that if I have one more takeaway, it's to step back and as you think about what's in the realm of the possible, make sure that you think about resourcing and priorities, because cyber operators are a finite asset, right? For any given nation, and so could they target you? Sure. Might Russia want to target you, or Iran want to target you? Sure. Is it anywhere close on their priority list right now, given all the other stuff they're dealing with and need intelligence collection for? Absolutely not, right? And so that's something to definitely remember as you hear some of the, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, Chicken Little kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, definitely, always be more suspect of what I call, hey, it's really interesting to claim that, hey, shark attacks on the beach could happen. And even though they do occur, the fear of entering the water on any given day, anywhere on the planet, and saying there's a shark attack is extremely rare. In fact, you probably have a greater chance of being hit by lightning in most cases than, having a shark attack, but it sells well and it makes sensational press as a result of it. Jake, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk about cyber operations today. My name's Rob Lee. I'm with the SANS Institute. This is Waychest and Infosec. And Jake, appreciate your time again. Thank you very much.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
All right. That segment really makes me happy, just for a variety of reasons. Is that there's a lot of folks that work day to day in cybersecurity that really haven't jumped into, what does actual cyber operations actually look like and what does it entail? There's not a lot of training on it. There's, unless you're in the military, you are probably not thinking about it other than from a defensive perspective in most cases. Why I think it's important, especially given today and what's going on in the news cycle across the world, is that people are starting to become more and more aware of what is the realm of possible, what is the realm of theoretical, and what is actually really going on behind the scenes. And these are some of the discussions that we'll probably come back to in the future, especially that we're seeing cyber components start to play out in most regional and international conflicts as a mainstay from here going forward. You'll see a lot of things in the press. You'll see a lot of things in the press that the press will actually get incorrect as well. One of the things that we truly pride ourselves after at the SANS Institute is being a steady voice, a steady hand of what is the realm of possible, what is really going on, and not trying to sensationalize anything just to grab headlines. We have a lot of our instructors and faculty that are originally from cyber operations in the military, not only here in the United States, but internationally. And they have a lot of experience, and there's a lot of head shaking that goes on when you just read some of the average headlines that are going on in the day-to-day press. So getting Jake on the show to kind of, outline how important it is, when you hear the press potentially utilize things like, well, it's probably a 0 day or 0 days are being used, and the likelihood of that happening considering how valuable they are. Why are a lot of international entities targeting civilian infrastructure, not just infrastructure, but banks, finance, pharmaceutical industries, and so forth? And there's a huge economic component to nation-state cyber operations as well, especially as it results against entities in the United States, Europe, and around the world. So this concept of where we're going, where we're at, and how to educate yourselves on it is something that in Waychest Infosec and other forums within the SANS Institute, we're going to slowly start touching that discussion a little bit more, because it's highly relevant as to what's going on in the industry on a daily basis, and some of the things that basically where my background comes from, doing in response against nation states over 20 years ago. So this is not something that's significantly new. It's something that we're starting to see a lot more discussion surrounding. And it's also something that we find quite fascinating to try and really level the understanding of the playing of what's the playing field that's going on behind the scenes.
Thank you for listening to the Wait Just an Infosec podcast. Remember to join us live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for a new episode of Wait Just an Infosec. You can watch at SANS.org/WJAI or go to the SANS LinkedIn or YouTube channels. The Wait Just an Infosec podcast will be released every Wednesday at noon. Thanks for listening. See you next week.